I was 24 when this happened, and it still feels surreal even retelling it. My two closest friends from college, Ryan and Caleb, wanted to celebrate finishing grad school with a short vacation. None of us had a lot of money to blow, so instead of flying somewhere fancy, we figured we'd do something simple but memorable. Ryan found a small cabin for rent in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. It wasn't anything luxurious, but it was cheap, tucked away in the woods, and had just enough room for the three of us. At the time, it sounded perfect. A break from the city. No professors, no exams, no work. Just a quiet retreat before we each went off into the real world. The drive out there was long, about 6 hours from Knoxville, but it was beautiful. The further we got into the mountains, the more isolated it felt. Dense trees lined both sides of the road, and the last 30 minutes were just winding gravel paths with no cell service. The cabin itself sat on a sloping ridge overlooking a deep stretch of forest. No other houses in sight. The owner left the key under a rock near the porch, and that was the first moment we realized just how remote it was. No neighbors, no streetlights, not even the faint glow of a town in the distance once the sun went down. Just pitch-black mountains and a cabin with 3 guys ready to drink cheap beer and relive old memories. The first night was normal, even fun. We grilled burgers, blasted music from Ryan's Bluetooth speaker, and sat on the porch with a cooler between us. Around midnight, though, something happened that didn't sit right with me. We were laughing about some old story from our freshman year when I thought I saw a flicker of movement down in the tree line. Just for a second. Like someone shifting between the trees. I brushed it off as shadows, or maybe an animal. Bears were common in the Smokies, and I told myself that's all it could be. Still, I found myself glancing down into the woods more than once, feeling this nagging sense that we weren't alone. The second day we went hiking, trying to squeeze in as much of the national park as we could. By the time we got back, we were exhausted. We cooked, played cards, and watched a movie on Ryan's laptop until around 2 in the morning. That's when Caleb said he swore he heard something outside. We paused the movie and listened. At first it was silent, but then we all heard it. The sound of crunching leaves and twigs snapping somewhere beyond the porch. Slow footsteps. Ryan, always the brave one, grabbed a flashlight and swung open the cabin door. The beam cut across the yard, and for a second everything looked still. Just trees, brush, and the steep drop-off into the forest. He waved the light around like he was trying to spook whatever it was, then came back inside saying, "Probably a deer. Chill." Caleb and I weren't convinced. There had been a rhythm to those steps, deliberate, careful, not random animal scurrying. But we didn't want to be the paranoid ones, so we let it slide. That night I couldn't sleep. The others snored away in their rooms while I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening. Every small creak in the cabin felt amplified. Around 3:30 I heard it again, leaves crunching, this time closer. My pulse quickened as I sat up and peered out the window. The yard was empty, but just as I started to back away, the flashlight we'd left on the porch, one of those old lantern-style ones, flickered on. Then it flickered off. On again. Off again. Like someone was toying with it. I froze, barely breathing, then woke Ryan and Caleb. They came rushing in, half asleep. But when they looked outside, the lantern was dead. Nothing moved in the yard. The third day we were supposed to head into town, but Ryan's car wouldn't start. No signal, no landline, and the nearest ranger station was about 15 miles away. We figured we'd try again later and just stick around the cabin. The atmosphere between us was different now. Quieter. Uneasy. None of us wanted to admit it, but we all felt it. Something was wrong out there. That night, just after 1 in the morning, Caleb shook me awake. His face was pale, his voice almost a whisper. "There's someone out there." We tiptoed to the living room window, and that's when I saw it too. A figure was standing just beyond the porch in the tree line. Not moving, not hiding, just standing there, facing the cabin. The darkness made it impossible to see details, but the outline was unmistakably human. Ryan wanted to shout at them, but I grabbed his arm. "Don't," I said. My gut told me this wasn't someone who got lost in the woods or needed help. Whoever they were waiting, watching. We shut the curtains and sat in silence, debating whether to stay awake until sunrise or try to sleep it off. None of us slept. Every hour or so, we'd hear noises outside. Faint footsteps, a branch snapping, the porch boards creaking as if someone was testing the weight of each step. But when we checked, nothing. By the fourth night, exhaustion had set in. We tried the car again with no luck. Caleb suggested we just start walking down the gravel road in the morning, find a signal and call for help. We all agreed. But that night was the worst of all. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to a sound I will never forget. The front door handle slowly twisting. I held my breath, staring at it from the couch where I'd passed out. The handle jiggled once, twice, then stopped. A moment later, the unmistakable sound of boots moved across the porch, pausing right by the window. I dared myself to peek out. For the briefest second, I locked eyes with someone. A pale face, almost gaunt, pressed close to the glass. Their eyes were wide, unblinking, and the corners of their mouth twitched into something that was not quite a smile. I stumbled back, heart racing so hard I thought it would stop. The figure didn't move, they just stood there, watching me until Ryan came running in with the flashlight. The second the beam hit the window, the figure was gone, vanished into the trees without a sound. We didn't sleep. At first light, we grabbed our bags and hiked down the road, leaving everything else behind. We walked for nearly 4 hours before we finally got cell reception and called for a tow truck. By the time we returned with the driver, the cabin looked untouched. No footprints on the porch, no sign of anyone in the woods. But when I went to grab my backpack from inside, I noticed something chilling. On the table, right in the middle of the cabin where none of us had left it, was the lantern from the porch. The one that had flickered on and off. To this day, I can't explain how it got there or who or what was outside that cabin for those 4 nights. All I know is that the Smoky Mountains are beautiful. But I'll never go back. Not after what we saw. Not after realizing that out there in all that darkness and isolation, sometimes you're not alone, even when you wish you were. Vacations by the ocean are supposed to be peaceful, the kind of thing you book when you need to clear your head. That was the whole point when I rented a little Airbnb outside Rockport, Maine. I had 3 days off work, and instead of spending them stuck in the city, I wanted the sound of waves outside my window, quiet mornings, and maybe a few long walks on the beach. The listing showed a 2-story house perched right above the rocky shoreline, with white siding, wraparound windows, and a deck with 2 Adirondack chairs facing the water. It looked simple, a little rustic, but that was exactly what I needed. The host called herself Janet. She was friendly, maybe too friendly. From the moment I booked, she sent message after message, not just confirmation details like you'd expect. She asked when I was arriving, if I was bringing anyone, if I liked to cook, even what shows I usually watched before bed. At first I told myself it was just hospitality, but there was something about the way her replies came instantly, no matter what hour I wrote, that felt unnatural. It was like she was always waiting for me. When I pulled into the driveway late in the afternoon, I knew right away the house didn't look like the pictures. The siding was peeling, the grass was knee-high, and a beat-up blue sedan sat crooked in the driveway like someone had left it in a rush. The listing had said no one else would be around, but seeing that car gave me a knot in my stomach. Still, I reminded myself that houses never look as nice as they do in photos, and forced a bit of optimism as I grabbed my bag. The key was under the mat, just like she said. Inside, everything was spotless. Counters gleamed, the wood floors had been scrubbed, and the beds were made so tight they could have been in a hotel. But it was the kind of spotless that felt staged. On the couch was a sweater that looked worn, not like something you'd put out for show. A pair of men's boots sat by the door. The refrigerator was full, which struck me as strange since the listing had never said it included food. It didn't feel like a rental. It felt like I had just walked into someone else's home while they'd stepped out. Upstairs, there were 3 bedrooms. 2 were open and perfectly made up, but one door was locked with a deadbolt. I tried the knob out of curiosity, but it didn't budge. It wasn't just latched, it was locked from the inside. I told myself the host probably used it for storage, but the idea of sleeping below a locked room bothered me more than I wanted to admit. That first night I tried to ignore it. I unpacked, cooked some pasta, poured a glass of wine, and sat on the deck while the ocean stretched out black and endless in front of me. For a little while it felt right. I watched the waves, smelled the salt in the air, and reminded myself this was supposed to be relaxing. But sometime around midnight while I lay scrolling on my phone, I heard a sound. A faint shuffle, fabric brushing against wood. It came from above me, directly above my bed. The locked room. I froze and listened. My breath held. It didn't repeat, but the silence after was worse. I convinced myself it had to be the old house creaking or maybe a gull on the roof, and eventually I closed my eyes. Still, every creak of the boards above me felt deliberate, like someone shifting their weight. The next day I went into town to distract myself. I walked through the little harbor, ate a lobster roll at a food shack, and browsed the gift shops where the locals watched me with polite but curious eyes. I didn't say where I was staying, but part of me wanted to ask if they knew the house. Something in my gut told me they would. When I got back that evening, I noticed it immediately. My suitcase, which I had zipped shut and left in the corner, was open on the bed. My clothes had been taken out and refolded into neat piles. I hadn't touched them. My mouth went dry. I checked every door and window. Locked. No sign of forced entry. But someone had been in the room. I told myself maybe I'd forgotten and left it unzipped. Maybe the window breeze had knocked it over. None of that explained the clothes folded on the bed. Someone had gone through my things and taken their time doing it. That night I left the lights on. Around 1 a.m. I heard the footsteps again, only clearer this time. Slow, deliberate pacing across the floor above me. I grabbed a broom from the closet and banged it against the ceiling. The footsteps stopped instantly. Too instantly. Whoever was up there heard me and froze. I sat awake in bed, wide-eyed, until I heard something worse, the sound of a door opening softly somewhere in the house. My heart dropped. I crept to the bedroom door and pressed my ear against it. Footsteps in the hallway. Slow, heavy, dragging slightly on the old wood. They stopped right outside my door. I could hear breathing. Steady. Calm. Inches from where I stood. I locked the door, shoved my weight against it, and whispered into my phone as I dialed 911. The dispatcher asked for my address, and as I gave it in a shaky voice, the doorknob rattled violently. It turned and jerked like someone was trying to force it open. I pressed harder, whispering frantically into the phone, my chest heaving. Then, silence. The knob stopped. The breathing faded. Whoever it was, they moved away. It took 40 minutes for the cops to arrive. By then, the house was quiet, every door and window still locked. They checked the upstairs room and found nothing. They told me I was probably just tired, maybe spooked by being alone in a strange house. When I pointed out the open suitcase and the clothes I never touched, they shrugged it off like I had forgotten. I didn't argue. But when they left, I sat in that bedroom staring at the ceiling, convinced someone had been in that house with me. I planned to leave in the morning, but I barely made it through the night. Around 3 a.m., I was half asleep when I heard the faint click of a camera, the unmistakable snap of a photo being taken. My eyes shot open and I lay perfectly still. Another click. Then silence. I didn't move until daylight. At sunrise, I grabbed my bag and walked straight to the car. I didn't even bother locking the door behind me. As I pulled onto the road, I glanced back at the house. One of the upstairs curtains shifted, just slightly, like someone was standing there watching me leave. 2 weeks later, I logged into Airbnb to leave a review. The listing was gone. Janet's profile, Deleted. No record of the house ever being available. It was like it had never existed on the site at all. I told myself to forget about it, to be grateful I left when I did. But a month later, a message request appeared on my Facebook from a name I didn't recognize. No profile picture, no mutual friends. Just one line. Thank you for not opening the door. The desert at night is a kind of empty most people never really experience. No houses glowing in the distance, no traffic hum, no airplanes passing overhead. Just black sky and an endless road stretching into nowhere. Allison and I had been driving since morning, trying to make it from Reno all the way down to Vegas in one day. On the map it hadn't looked so bad, but mile after mile of nothing wears you down faster than you expect. By the time the sun set, we had stopped talking. The car was quiet except for the engine and the occasional thud when a bug splattered against the windshield. We hadn't planned on stopping. The idea was to reach Vegas, check into a real hotel, and crash hard. But exhaustion crept up on us in waves. First the heavy eyes, then the creeping headache, then the kind of silence between us that meant both of us were fighting to stay awake. The highway signs went from miles between towns to next services 86 miles. The gas gauge slipped closer to empty. I tried to lighten the mood, asking Allison to pick a playlist, but she just shook her head. I just want to get there, she muttered, her voice low, flat. Around 10 we saw light ahead, a gas station, the only one we'd seen in hours. The canopy light flickered as we pulled in, buzzing louder than the crickets. The pump was old, the kind with numbers that flipped manually, and inside the shack of a building was a single man. His door was propped open with a cinder block, and smoke drifted out in the stale desert air. When I walked in to pay, he didn't greet me, just watched as I set a 20 on the counter. His eyes were bloodshot and sunken, his skin cracked from years of desert air. I tried to crack a joke about being in the middle of nowhere, but he didn't smile. He slid the change toward me with a dirty fingernail and said in a voice that rasped like gravel, "Not much out here after this, best keep driving." I got back in the car, forcing a laugh as I told Allison. "Creepy gas station guy says we should keep driving. Guess he's not big on tourism." She didn't laugh. She kept staring out the window at the desert, her reflection faint in the glass, as if she was waiting for something to step out of the dark. By midnight, I knew we weren't going to make it to Vegas. I was white-knuckling the steering wheel, the dash lights blurry, and Allison had dozed off with her head against the window. When the neon sign appeared on the horizon, glowing red against the empty black, it felt like a mirage. "Sundown Motel," the sign said, though half the letters were burnt out so it read more like Sudao Motel. We pulled off the highway into a gravel lot where a row of single-story rooms sat in a line. 10 doors, each with a bulb above it, most of them dead. A soda machine leaned against one wall, its paint sun-bleached and dented. I woke Allison and said, "We're stopping. I can't drive another hour." She blinked blearily at the sign, then at the row of rooms. "This place looks like a murder scene," she said softly. I told her it was one night. Better than falling asleep at the wheel. The office was a small box at the far end. Inside, behind a cracked plexiglass panel, an old man sat slouched in a chair. His hair was gray, stringy, and his eyes didn't quite line up on me when I stepped in. He didn't ask where we were from, didn't make any small talk. He just pushed a ledger across the counter and tapped the pen. I signed my name, wrote down our plate number, and slid over $40 in cash. He handed me a brass key with a dented keychain. Room 7. When Allison stepped inside behind me, his eyes lingered on her a little too long. Blank face, no expression. But he didn't look away until I turned. Room 7 smelled faintly of mildew. The carpet was worn through in patches, the bedspread thin and faded blue with cigarette burns. The lamp flickered when I turned it on. The curtains barely covered the window, leaving a strip of glass exposed to the lot. Allison stood there for a moment, arms crossed, staring out at the row of cars in the desert beyond. "This is creepy," she muttered. I tossed my bag onto the bed and forced a grin. "Hey, it's a roof. Tomorrow we'll be in Vegas. We'll laugh about this." She didn't smile. I showered first. The water came out metallic and lukewarm, but after 10 hours in the car it felt good. When I came out toweling my hair, Allison was perched on the bed scrolling her phone. She looked up and said quietly, "I think someone just walked past the window." My stomach dropped. I glanced at the curtain. The lot outside glowed orange from the flickering sign, but I didn't see anyone. I told her it was probably just another guest, but deep down, I knew how empty that lot had been. We locked the door, checked it twice, and tried to sleep. Sometime after 3 a.m., a sound pulled me awake. A faint scrape at the door. I held my breath, straining to listen. Then came the rattle of the knob, soft at first, then more insistent. "Allison," I whispered. She stirred, confused, until she heard it too. Her eyes went wide. We both stayed silent, listening. The knob twisted slowly, pressing against the lock, then stopped. Silence. Then footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving past the window. I got up, my legs trembling, and pressed my eye to the peephole. What I saw made me stumble back so hard I hit the wall. A man's face filled the circle of glass. He was smiling. Not a normal smile. Wide, stretched, teeth bared. His eyes locked on mine through the peephole, unblinking. Allison whispered frantically, "What? Who is it?" I told her not to look. My skin crawled as I realized that smile wasn't random. He knew I was watching. That smile was for me. We sat in silence, frozen, until the footsteps moved away. Gravel crunched softly. His shadow passed the window. Then nothing. I didn't sleep. Allison dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every noise. Around 5, I checked the lock again. The chain was in place, but the deadbolt? It was undone. I know I had locked it. At dawn, we packed quickly, barely speaking. The lot was empty except for our car. The office blinds were drawn, no sign of the old man. Just as I turned the ignition, Allison gasped. A folded piece of paper was wedged under the windshield wiper. My hands shook as I opened it. In blocky letters it read, "Room 7 always looks best at night." We drove without a word. Didn't stop until Vegas. For a couple of days we tried to put it out of our heads. We told ourselves it was just some creep playing a prank. But a week later, Allison called me at work, her voice trembling. Someone had messaged her on Instagram from an account with no picture. Attached was a photo of her in the motel bathroom brushing her teeth, her reflection caught in the cracked mirror. The caption said, "You shouldn't have left so soon." She couldn't stop crying after that. She started sleeping with the lights on. She jumped whenever her phone buzzed. She stopped wanting to be alone, but she also stopped wanting to be with me. Every time she looked at me, she said she remembered that night. The fear, the peephole smile, the sense that we had been watched the entire time. Within a month, she ended things. Not because she didn't care, but because she couldn't carry that night anymore. And being with me reminded her of it. It's been years since then. I've stayed in dozens of hotels and motels, but every time I slide a key into a lock, I feel my throat tighten. I check the peephole 3 times before bed. And sometimes, when I wake in the dark, I swear I hear gravel crunching slowly outside the door like someone circling, waiting, smiling just inches away. The ocean looks different when you're standing on it instead of next to it. From the dock in Miami, the water was sparkling and endless, filled with anticipation and excitement. Hundreds of people were lining up to board, dragging suitcases, snapping pictures, buzzing with the thrill of a vacation. I was one of them, carrying a duffel bag and grinning at my best friend Mark as we passed through security. A 5-day cruise to the Bahamas had seemed like the perfect escape after a long winter. Sunshine, drinks by the pool, live shows. maybe even a little gambling in the onboard casino. It was the kind of thing you see in commercials. Nothing but fun. The ship itself was massive, a floating city with 12 decks, 2 pools, a buffet that never closed, and cabins lined in endless hallways. We'd booked a budget room, interior with no windows, but we didn't care. We wouldn't be spending much time inside anyway. The first afternoon we explored everything, racing up stairwells, checking out the game room, and watching the Miami coastline shrink into the horizon as the horn blared. Everyone on deck cheered. It felt like adventure was just beginning. That night the air changed. I woke up around 2 in the morning to the sound of footsteps in the hall. At first I thought it was just drunk passengers stumbling back to their rooms, but the steps didn't stop. Back and forth, slow, steady. I nudged Mark awake. "You hear that?" He groaned, rolled over, and told me to ignore it. But I couldn't. It went on for nearly an hour. The sound of someone pacing, dragging their feet, pausing right outside our door before turning back again. The next morning at breakfast, I scanned the other passengers, wondering who had been walking all night. Everyone looked normal. Families with kids, couples in matching shirts, groups of college friends. We sat near the window and watched the endless water roll past. When I mentioned the footsteps, Mark brushed it off with a laugh. "Dude, we're on a ship with 2,000 people. Someone's always up." By day 2, something else felt off. At the pool, I noticed a woman sitting alone at the edge, staring out at the horizon. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and her clothes looked too heavy for the heat. Every time I glanced her way, she was already looking back at me. No expression, no blink, just eyes locked. When I nudged Mark and pointed her out, she was gone. He teased me for being paranoid, but that night the pacing footsteps returned. This time there was more. Around 3 a.m. I heard a soft knock at the door. Just one, quick. My chest tightened. Mark was snoring, oblivious. I pressed my ear to the wood. On the other side, a whisper. I couldn't make out words, but it was low and rhythmic, like someone muttering a prayer. My hand hovered over the handle, but I didn't move. After a minute, the whisper stopped. The footsteps faded. I lay awake until morning. By day 3, the ship felt different. Crowds seemed thinner. At breakfast, there were fewer people than before, though I couldn't explain why. Mark said maybe some were sleeping in. But I remembered how packed the buffet had been on the first morning. Now, whole sections of tables were empty. When I asked a crew member casually about the passenger count, he smiled stiffly and said everything was fine, then walked away before I could press further. That afternoon, we went exploring on the lower decks. The hallways seemed endless, each door identical. But one section was taped off with a velvet rope, a sign reading, "Staff only." Mark, always the curious one, slipped under. I followed reluctantly. At the end of the corridor, we found a door slightly ajar. Inside was a room with folding chairs and cleaning supplies, nothing unusual. But the smell hit me like a wall. Damp, sour, metallic. On one of the chairs sat a child's flip-flop, bright pink, too new to have been left behind. I picked it up, but Mark hissed at me to drop it. A door slammed somewhere deeper in the restricted area, and we bolted. When we emerged back into the regular hallway, a crew member was waiting. His smile was stretched too wide. "Guests aren't allowed down there," he said evenly. His eyes never left mine until we walked away. That night I couldn't sleep. The air in our cabin felt stale, the walls too close. Around 2 a.m., the footsteps returned, louder than before. Pacing, dragging. Then the knock. 3 times this time. Mark stirred, groaning. "What is it now?" I whispered. "Listen." We both froze as a voice drifted through the door. This time it was clearer, a low, gravelly whisper. "Come with me." I backed away from the door. Mark tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. Probably just kids messing around. But when he checked the peephole, he went silent. I asked what he saw. He just stepped back, pale, and said, "Nothing. Nobody's there." On day 4, people began whispering openly. Whole families missing from breakfast. Rooms left unmade. One couple we'd met on the first night at dinner. Gone. Their table empty. When Mark asked a bartender about it, the man's smile faltered for just a second before snapping back. Some passengers disembark early for excursions, he said. But we were in the middle of the ocean. There were no stops, no ports. That evening, Mark wanted to drink and forget about it. I couldn't. My skin prickled every time we walked down a hallway. I kept glancing over my shoulder, and every time I looked, it felt like someone had just turned the corner a second before me. That night was the worst. The pacing started earlier, around midnight. Then the knock. Louder this time. The whisper grew insistent. "Come with me. Come see." Mark, drunk and reckless, shouted back, "Leave us alone." The whisper fell silent. For a moment I thought it was over. Then the handle began to turn, slow and steady, pressing against the lock. We both lunged forward, holding it in place. The pressure grew stronger, like someone was forcing it from the other side. My heart pounded, sweat running down my back. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. But when I looked down, something was wedged under the door. A folded piece of paper. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, written in dark, smudged letters, "Cabin 417 always looks best at night. Our cabin, 417. Mark wanted to laugh it off as a prank, but his face said otherwise. Neither of us slept. On the final day, the ship felt hollow. Hallways stretched empty, pools deserted. The buffet had only a handful of people picking silently at their plates. Crew members avoided eye contact. That evening, as the sun set, I stood on the deck staring out at the horizon. That same woman from day 2 was there again. Pale, heavy clothes, eyes fixed on me. I blinked, and she was closer, a few feet away, staring without expression. When I turned to call for Mark, she was gone. That night, Mark disappeared. I woke to the sound of the door creaking. He wasn't in bed. I rushed into the hallway calling his name. The corridor stretched long and empty, doors closed. At the far end I saw him, standing with his back to me facing the pale woman. She reached out, took his hand, and together they stepped through a staff-only door. By the time I ran to it, they were gone. I searched until sunrise. No sign of him. Crew brushed me off when I begged for help. "He's probably at breakfast," they said with stiff smiles. But his plate at the table sat untouched. His bag still in the room, his passport on the desk. When the ship docked in Miami, I was the only one who disembarked from our cabin. They asked no questions, no forms, no report, just smiled, thanked me for sailing, and ushered me off. It's been years. Mark was never found. His family doesn't speak to me anymore. I've replayed that night 1,000 times in my head, wondering if I should have followed him through that door, if I should have forced it open. But sometimes, in the dark, I hear the shuffle of pacing footsteps outside my apartment. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear a whisper at the door, "Come with me." When my family rented the lake house in upstate New York, it was supposed to be the kind of trip that fixed everything. We'd had a rough couple of years. Financial struggles, constant fighting, my dad working late nights, my mom exhausted from holding everything together. My younger sister Emily was 15, caught in the middle of it all. My parents thought a summer trip to a secluded lake house might bring us back together. Just a week away from the noise of the city. No distractions, just nature and each other. The drive up was long. 4 hours of winding roads through thick forests, the trees pressing in like walls. When we finally reached the lake, the water stretched out like glass, catching the reflection of the sky so perfectly that for a moment it felt like we were driving into the clouds. The house was tucked right up against the shore. 2 stories, old but sturdy, with weathered siding and wide windows that looked directly onto the water. A wooden dock jutted out into the lake, tied with canoes that swayed gently in the breeze. Inside, The house smelled of cedar and something faintly metallic like old pipes. It was furnished simply. Heavy wooden chairs, faded rugs, bookshelves lined with dusty novels. The bedrooms were upstairs, each with creaky floors and thin curtains. Emily immediately claimed the room with the best view of the dock, and I settled into the one next to it. My parents took the master at the end of the hall. The first couple of days felt almost normal. We grilled burgers on the deck, paddled out in the canoe, swam until our skin wrinkled. At night we sat by the fire pit, fireflies flickering around us, cicadas buzzing in the trees. Emily teased me about checking my phone constantly, and for once my dad actually laughed instead of snapping at me. For a while, it really felt like maybe this trip could heal some of the cracks in our family. On the third night, I woke around 2 a.m. to the sound of water. At first I thought it was just the lake lapping against the dock, but when I pulled back the curtain my breath caught. Emily was standing at the end of the dock. She was barefoot, still in her pajamas, her hair tangled by the wind. Her arms hung limp at her sides, her head tilted slightly as she stared out at the water. I shoved open the window and hissed, "Emily, what are you doing?" She didn't react. She didn't even flinch. I ran downstairs and out into the damp night air, the grass cold beneath my feet. As I rushed down the dock, I called her name again. She turned slowly, then her eyes wide and pale in the moonlight. Her lips moved, but at first no sound came out. When I finally heard her whisper, it chilled me. I heard them calling. "Who?" I asked, my voice shaking. She blinked like she was waking from a trance. "Never mind. Forget it." Then she brushed past me and walked back to the house without another word. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. When I tried to bring it up, she laughed it off. "You must have been dreaming." But it wasn't a dream. By the 4th day, small things began to pile up. My mom swore she saw someone standing at the tree line when she looked out the kitchen window. A tall man, still as stone, half hidden in the shadows. But when she blinked, he was gone. My dad got angry one evening, accusing my mom of moving his wallet, only to find it hours later inside the refrigerator. He said she was playing games. She swore she hadn't touched it. They screamed at each other until Emily slammed her door upstairs, shouting for them to stop. That night I woke again. This time it wasn't water I heard, but footsteps. Slow, deliberate creaks in the hallway just outside my room. I thought it was my dad, but when I peeked out, it was Emily. She was standing perfectly still, her eyes open but empty, sleepwalking. Her head turned toward me in a slow, unnatural way, and she whispered in a voice that didn't sound like hers at all. "It's under the water, waiting." I slammed my door and locked it, my heart racing. In the morning, Emily acted normal again. On the 5th day, things escalated. My dad became convinced my mom was whispering to Emily behind his back. At breakfast, he slammed his fist on the table, shouting that he heard voices at night, that my mom was sneaking into Emily's room to tell her things. My mom's face crumpled in horror. She swore she hadn't done anything. Emily sat silently, staring down at her plate before nodding once. "You did," she said softly. "You tell me things when he's not here." My dad's face went pale, then red with rage. He stormed out to the dock, his footsteps heavy on the wood. My mom broke down crying. Emily just kept eating, slow and calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. That night the house felt suffocating. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. At some point I heard the back door open. I rushed to the window and saw my dad walking down the dock, Emily already there waiting. She turned to him and reached out her hand. I ran outside, my breath sharp in my throat. By the time I reached them, they were both standing at the edge, staring at the black water. Emily whispered, "It wants one of us." My dad turned to me, his face pale, sweat dripping down his temples. "You hear it too, don't you?" he asked. "I don't hear anything," I shouted, panicked. "You're scaring me." Emily smiled then. Not her normal smile. Something wrong, stretched, almost cruel. "It's okay," she said. "It'll be over soon." Before I could stop her, she stepped forward. My dad lunged, grabbing her arm, but she twisted with a strength that wasn't hers and pulled him with her. They plunged into the water together. I screamed, diving after them. The lake was freezing, darker than ink. I thrashed, reaching, but it was like something was pulling them deeper. I swear I saw hands in the water, pale, clawing, dragging them down. My lungs burned as I kicked upward, breaking the surface, gasping. When I scrambled back onto the dock, the lake was calm, silent. I called the police, the Coast Guard, anyone who would listen. They dragged the lake for days. Nothing. No bodies. No clothes. Not even bubbles. When I finally left, my mom silent beside me in the car, the house shrinking in the rearview mirror. I looked back one last time. Emily was standing on the dock, dripping wet, smiling. She lifted her hand and waved. Then she was gone. The police called it an accident. A drowning. They wrote it off as panic, fatigue, rough waters. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And at night, when I close my eyes, I still hear Emily's whisper. It's under the water, waiting. New Orleans had always been on my list. I wanted the music, the food, the chaos of Bourbon Street, and the kind of late nights people tell stories about for years after. When I finally booked the trip, I couldn't afford a hotel anywhere in the French Quarter, so I chose a hostel. $20 a night right in the middle of it all. The photos made it look colorful and fun. Backpackers playing cards, murals on the walls, smiling staff. The kind of place where you meet people from all over and maybe even make friends. When I arrived, it was late afternoon, the sun turning the buildings gold. The street outside was alive. Musicians playing brass instruments on the corner, people carrying plastic cups filled with bright red drinks. A group of tourists laughing too loud as they stumbled past. The hostel was tucked between a daiquiri bar and a souvenir shop. The sign was half burned out, the paint on the walls chipped and faded. Inside, it was quieter. A small desk stood in front of a cramped common room with sagging couches. Behind the desk sat a young woman, maybe mid-20s, her hair in a messy bun, her name tag reading, Lila. She didn't look up from her phone until I stood there for a full minute. When she finally smiled, it didn't reach her eyes. She slid me a clipboard without saying much, had me sign my name, then handed me a key card. "Room upstairs," she said. "You'll figure it out." The dorm room held 12 bunks, stacked metal frames that creaked when anyone moved. Half were already taken. The air was hot, humid, and smelled faintly of mildew. A ceiling fan whirred overhead, pushing the heat around more than cooling it. A couple of travelers nodded at me. One guy with a European accent gave me a quick wave, but most kept to themselves, earbuds in, faces turned toward the wall. I shoved my bag under the bottom bunk and tried to shake the strange feeling crawling up my spine. That first night, I went out like every other tourist. Bourbon Street was alive, neon lights flashing, music thumping from every doorway. By midnight I was sweaty, buzzed, and exhausted, and I stumbled back to the hostel ready to crash. The common room was empty except for Lila behind the desk. She looked up as I passed and gave me that same thin smile. The dorm was dark, a chorus of snores and shifting bodies. I crawled into bed and drifted off quickly. Somewhere after 2 a.m., I woke. At first I thought it was just someone using the bathroom, but then I heard it again. A sound that didn't fit, dragging. A slow scrape against the floorboards out in the hall. Not footsteps exactly, but heavy, deliberate movement. It drew closer, pausing outside the dorm door. My chest tightened as I held my breath. The handle jiggled softly as if someone was testing it. I waited, frozen, until the sound finally moved away, fading down the hall. The next morning, one of the bunks was empty. The guy who had waved at me the night before was gone, his bed stripped, his bag missing. I figured maybe he checked out early, though I didn't remember hearing him leave. When I went downstairs, I asked Lila casually, "Did the guy in bunk 4 leave already?" She looked at me blankly. "People come and go all the time." Her voice was flat, final. I didn't press. That day I threw myself into the city. I ate beignets at Café du Monde, wandered through the French market, listened to street performers play jazz that shook the pavement. By evening, I had almost forgotten the night before. Almost. When I came back, the dorm was filled with new faces. Among them was a girl named Rachel, sitting on her bunk with a notebook in her lap. We got to talking quietly after lights out. She'd been there for almost 2 weeks. "Too long," she said with a nervous laugh. "Why too long?" I asked. She lowered her voice. "People keep disappearing." I thought she meant travelers moving on to the next city. Like, checking out? She shook her head slowly. "No. Disappearing. Their stuff's still here sometimes, but they're gone. No goodbyes, no checkout. Nothing. Staff doesn't say a word. Everyone just pretends it's normal." Her eyes darted toward the door. "Don't walk around alone at night," she whispered. Her words stayed with me. That night, I lay awake, watching shadows stretch across the ceiling. Around 3 a.m., the dragging sound came again. Slow, steady. It stopped outside our room. And then came the whisper. Too faint to understand, but close. Right on the other side of the door. The sound of someone murmuring words in a rhythm that made my skin crawl. No one else stirred. Not a single body shifted in their bunk. I squeezed my eyes shut until the whisper faded, and the footsteps moved away. The next day, Rachel's bed was empty. Her notebook gone. I went straight to Lila at the desk. "Where's the girl in bunk 6? "Rachel?" Lila tilted her head, almost curious. "Checked out early." I shook my head. "She told me she was here for 2 weeks. "She checked out," Lila repeated, her smile wide, but her eyes empty. Something in me snapped then. I started paying attention. Watching. During the day, the hostel seemed normal enough. Backpackers came and went, playing cards, reading in the corner, charging their phones. But I noticed things. The way the staff moved in and out of the basement carrying boxes. The way Lila never seemed to leave the desk. The way guests' names vanished from the check-in board without explanation. That night, I pretended to sleep. I slowed my breathing, closed my eyes. Around 2:30, the door creaked open. A figure stepped inside. Tall, shoulders hunched. They moved from bed to bed, stopping at each one, listening. My heart pounded as they drew closer. When they crouched by my bunk, I felt their breath. Sour, damp, too close. I forced my eyelids to stay half shut, barely cracked. Their face hovered inches from mine. The skin was pale, stretched, their eyes reflecting the faint light from the hall. They smiled, teeth too long, too sharp. I nearly broke then, but I kept still. After a long moment, they stood and moved away. I lay frozen until dawn. By morning, another bunk was empty. I couldn't take it anymore. That afternoon, I explored the basement. Most of the doors were locked, but one was ajar. Inside was a storage room, or at least it looked like one. Old furniture piled in corners, broken chairs stacked high. But the walls told a different story. Symbols carved deep into the wood. Spirals, jagged lines, marks that made my head ache if I stared too long. And on the floor, a shoe, small, pink, a child's flip-flop, too new to belong in a place this rundown. My stomach dropped. When I turned, Lila was standing in the doorway. Her face was expressionless, her eyes fixed on me. "You shouldn't be down here," she said softly. I pushed past her, stumbling back upstairs, my pulse hammering. That night, I couldn't pretend anymore. When the dragging footsteps came, I sat up, my chest tight. The door opened slowly. The man stepped inside, his face pale, his eyes glinting. He smiled when he saw me awake. "You're next," he whispered. I bolted, shoved past him, ran down the hall barefoot on the wooden floor. Doors slammed shut as I passed, like the other guests were retreating, hiding from the noise. In the common room, Lila was waiting. She wasn't surprised. "You shouldn't be up," she said again. I didn't stop. I crashed through the front door and into the street, right into the chaos of Bourbon Street. Music, laughter, neon lights, people everywhere, drunk, oblivious. I screamed for help, but no one even looked twice. When I came back with police minutes later, the building was silent. The door hung open. Inside, every bunk was neatly made. No bags, no notebooks, no shoes, no people. The officer gave me a puzzled look. "This place has been closed for years," he said. I stammered, pointing to the desk, the bunks, the stairs. But they were gone. The walls were bare, the floors coated in dust. The smell of mildew was stronger than ever, like the building had been rotting empty for decades. They dismissed me as drunk, confused, maybe mixing up addresses. But I know where I stayed. I know what I saw. And sometimes, even now, lying in my own bed thousands of miles away, I hear it again. The dragging footsteps, and a whisper curling through the dark. "You're next." When my friends suggested Mexico for our summer vacation, I jumped at it. The idea of escaping our small Midwestern town for beaches, palm trees, and cocktails with umbrellas sounded like heaven. There were 4 of us. Me, my best friend Tyler, his girlfriend Megan, and my cousin Ryan. We were all in our early 20s, broke but determined to make it work. Tyler found a deal online, a resort just outside Cancun, offering exclusive rates if you booked directly through their site. It wasn't one of the big names, not something you'd see in glossy brochures, but the pictures looked amazing. Blue pools stretching to the horizon, private balconies, glowing lights at night. For $50 a night, it was too good to pass up. We flew down in early August. From the moment we stepped off the plane, the heat hit like a wall. The air was thick, humid, carrying the scent of salt and something faintly sweet. The cab ride from the airport was long, the driver oddly quiet as we left the city and passed into stretches of jungle. When I asked how far the resort was, he just muttered, "Soon," without meeting my eyes. When we finally pulled up, my stomach dropped. The entrance looked nothing like the website photos. The gates were rusted, the sign faded and cracked. The main building rose tall, but several wings were dark, windows boarded or shattered. Only the central lobby glowed with dim light. "Are you sure this is the place?" Megan whispered. Tyler checked his phone. "Yeah, this is it. Look, same name." We dragged our bags inside. The lobby smelled of mildew and chlorine. A single ceiling fan turned lazily overhead. Behind the desk, a man in a faded uniform greeted us with a stiff smile. His eyes looked tired, sunken. He handed us old-fashioned metal keys, not the sleek cards shown in the pictures. "Your rooms are ready," he said. His voice was flat, his accent thick. "Pool closes at 10. Do not leave the property after dark." The way he said it made my skin prickle. Our rooms were side by side on the 4th floor. The elevator groaned as it carried us up. The hallway carpet was threadbare, the lights flickering. My room smelled faintly of damp plaster. Still, the balcony looked out over the ocean, the waves crashing white against the sand, and for a moment, I told myself it would be fine. That first night we drank by the pool. The water was oddly cold, even in the heat. No one else was around. No other guests. No staff. Just the 4 of us, floating in silence under the stars. Around midnight, I thought I saw someone watching from one of the darkened balconies above. A shadow against the glow of the moon. When I blinked, it was gone. The next day we explored. Most of the resort was empty. whole wings locked off with chains across the doors. The main restaurant was closed, chairs stacked on tables, dust thick on the floor. A single snack bar by the pool served stale chips and watery soda. When Tyler asked about the all-inclusive meals advertised online, the bartender shrugged. "Tomorrow," he said. But tomorrow came and nothing changed. By the third night, I couldn't sleep. The air felt heavy in my room, pressing against my chest. Around 2 a.m., I heard knocking on my balcony door. Slow, deliberate. I froze. My room was on the 4th floor. No ledge outside. No way anyone could be there. The knocking came again, louder. I crept to the curtains and pulled them just an inch. A face stared back, pale, eyes wide, mouth stretched into a grin too big for its head. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The glass rattled under the knock, faster now, insistent. Then it stopped. When I looked again, the balcony was empty. The next morning I didn't tell the others, but Megan looked pale, her hands shaking as she stirred her coffee. Finally she whispered, Did anyone else hear knocking last night?" My stomach twisted. On the 5th day, Tyler and Ryan wanted to go into town. The desk clerk stopped them. His expression never changed, but his voice sharpened. "Do not leave after dark. Stay inside. Stay together." That evening, we ignored him. We wanted real food, real drinks, not the lifeless pool bar. The cab dropped us in Cancun, and for a few hours it felt like the vacation we'd dreamed of. Music, crowded clubs, laughter. But when we returned after midnight, the resort was dark. Every window, even the lobby. Inside, the halls were colder. Too cold. Our footsteps echoed, swallowed by silence. When we reached our floor, the hallway lights flickered. For a split second, I saw shapes. People standing in the shadows at the far end, staring. Their faces were pale, eyes wide. Then the light steadied, and the hallway was empty. That night, Ryan didn't come back to his room. We searched everywhere. The pool, the lobby, even the chained-off wings. The desk clerk just shook his head. Guests leave sometimes. Leave? Without his passport? Without his bag? I shouted. The man just stared at me until I walked away. Megan was unraveling by then. She wouldn't sleep, jumping at every sound. She swore she heard voices in the vents whispering her name. Tyler tried to stay strong, but I saw the cracks. The way he gripped my arm too tight when we walked the halls. The way his eyes darted constantly over his shoulder. On the 7th night, Megan vanished. I woke to the sound of her screaming. I bolted into the hall. Her door was open, Tyler already there. Inside, the room was empty. The curtains fluttered, the balcony door wide open. Her bag still on the bed, her passport still on the nightstand. We searched until sunrise. Nothing. By then, Tyler was breaking. He wouldn't talk, barely ate. He sat by the pool all day, staring at the water. That night, I woke to find his bed empty. I ran through the resort, calling his name. Finally, I heard splashing. At the pool, he was floating on his back, eyes wide open, mouth moving silently. I dove in, grabbing him, shaking him. His skin was ice cold. His lips moved again, and I leaned close. "They're in the walls," he whispered. Then he slipped under the water. I dove after him, the chlorine burning my eyes, but it was like something was pulling him down. I felt hands brush my legs, cold, bony. I surfaced, gasping, and when I dove again, the pool was empty. I staggered out, coughing, sobbing. Alone. The next morning, I demanded the clerk call the police. He smiled. "You'll be checking out soon," he said. When I screamed at him, he slid a ledger across the counter. My name was already written there under departures. The date was the next day. I fled to my room, shaking, shoving clothes into my bag. My hands froze when I picked up my passport. The pages were damp, smudged. And on the last page, stamped in red ink, was the word departed. The date was 10 years earlier. I left everything behind, ran barefoot into the jungle, not stopping until I reached the highway. A passing truck picked me up, the driver staring at me like I was a ghost. When I looked back, the resort was gone. Just trees, endless and dark. It's been years since that trip. I never saw my friends again. Their families never got answers. Sometimes I wonder if I really made it out, if I'm living at all, or if I checked out that night like the ledger said. But some nights, I wake to the sound of knocking. Slow, deliberate, on the glass of my bedroom window, and when I pull back the curtain I swear I see the ocean.